So Linux, a lot of people think if Linux is written in the job description, a lot of people think Linux is scripting language. Okay. But to be honest with you, Linux is the operating system. Okay. So Linux is actually an operating system. Now, what is this operating system? Okay. Let's understand what is this operating system. So guys, in your laptop, you have the hardware. Okay, in your laptop you have the hardware. What is hardware? Which you can touch. Let's say you have RAM, CPU, you have storage. If you just open up, if you just pull out some nuts of your laptop, you will be able to touch all the hardware pieces. You will be able to see RAM, you will be able to see the processor, you will be able to see all your ports and everything. That is hardware. Okay, hardware is actually a tangible object which you can see and touch. Now there is software like Netflix. Everyone uses Netflix. uh, Amazon Prime, Amazon.com, e-commerce website, Thinkcloudly.com. Or what is this? These are the software. Okay. Now these applications or these software, how these software will know what to use, how much RAM to use, and how much CPU to use, or how to use. These softwares are made only for that particular function. Let's say if it's Netflix, you can watch movies. So Netflix can help you to watch movies. Thinkcloudly can help you to watch your recorded sessions. But how these applications are able to communicate with hardware and utilize hardware. So if you open Netflix in your laptop, right, it occupies RAM, it occupies your memory, your storage, it occupies a lot of hardware components. How this communication happens between software and hardware? That happens with the help of operating system. So operating system is actually a middleware. It is considered as middleware, software, middleware, and hardware. This helps software for the communication with hardware. So let's say if you open Netflix, right? Netflix will ask operating system, I want to consume 2 GB of RAM. Hardware will talk, so operating system will talk to hardware and will allocate 2 GB of RAM for Netflix. That's why whenever you open Google Chrome in your laptop, it takes some time. Why does it take time? Because operating system is trying to communicate and allocate the memory to your application. I hope everyone has always seen that whenever you open an application, it takes time to load. Why? Because there is a hardware allocation is going on in the background. That is why it takes time to load your applications. And that is the work of operating system. Now, always remember that operating system is divided into two parts: shell and kernel. Shell and kernel. Kernel is responsible to talk to hardware and shell is responsible to talk to software. Okay, so you can say, and these two people can talk to each other. So all the operating systems are divided into two parts: shell and kernel. Shell talks to software and kernel talks to hardware. Okay. Now, what are the examples of your operating systems? In day-to-day life, you are using Windows. That is your operating system. You're using Mac. A lot of people have MacBook. So that is Mac operating system you're using. And third one is Linux. Just like your Windows and Mac, there is a Linux. Linux is also operating system which has shell and kernel and which helps to talk to software to hardware. So that is why Linux is actually an operating system. Okay, it is actually an operating system. It is a very good friend of software and hardware. So Linux is an operating system, and that's why it is a very good friend of software and hardware. That's why it facilitates the communication between software and hardware. It is Linux as compared to Linux, Windows, and Mac. We have always seen in our homes, we have Windows. Some people have MacBook. In our homes, we always use Windows. But you know what? Linux is being used much more than Windows and Mac. So Linux is actually very much popular for all the applications. So you're using Netflix, right? Netflix is using the server in the background that is on Linux, because Linux is lightweight, it is robust, and it is application friendly. That is why Linux is used widely for all the applications. Facebook uses Linux. Your Netflix uses Linux. All the applications, they are on Linux because Linux is lightweight and it gives much more capabilities. Okay. Then the question is that if Linux is the operating system, then why we use Linux as scripting? So this is the question which a lot of people have, that when we look at the JD always says that you should know Linux scripting. And over here in this session, I am saying Linux is the operating system. How is this possible that Linux is the operating system, but job description is asking about Linux scripting? Okay. So Linux is, as I said, Linux has two parts, shell and kernel. So shell is actually the scripting part of it, that you execute some commands to talk to hardware. Okay. So they want you to have a good experience on shell scripting. Okay. So they want you to have the idea about shell scripting. In every job description, when you see Linux, it means they are asking not about kernel. Kernel is the internal software, internal tool, which you cannot even touch and see. They always ask about shell scripting because shell is responsible for all the hardware communication. Okay. So they always want you to have skills on shell. Okay. So that is why Linux scripting is very important for us. When we go in any of the interview, it is really help because it is good to have actually. Now I just want to tell you before I actually jump on to a lot of commands, I want to tell you about something which might confuse you sometimes. So don't get surprised, just flavors. Flavors means Linux comes into a lot of flavors. Just like your ice cream comes into strawberry, your vanilla, a lot of flavors are there, chocolate. Just like that, Linux comes into multiple flavors. Okay. So we have, I have listed down 5 over here, but we have much more than 5. 5 is a number, but there are multiple, flavors you will find for Linux. So if you're working for one company, they might be using CentOS. If you're working for another company, they might be using Fedora. It doesn't matter. All these are the flavors, but it is actually made on Linux itself. So these are the flavors of Linux. Okay. So CentOS, Fedora, Mint, Red Hat, Debian. So whenever you go in the interview and they ask you that, have you heard about CentOS? So don't get surprised. It is just the flavor of Linux. CentOS Linux, Fedora Linux, Mint Linux, Red Hat Linux, Debian Linux. Okay, all are Linux. So don't get surprised. These are different organizations. What they have done, they have taken the Linux and created their own version of it. So Red Hat is an organization. If you search Red Hat on Google, Red Hat is actually an organization. What they did, they packaged Linux with more applications and they started selling it. Mint, they started selling it. So these are different organizations which are selling Linux. CentOS is something which is free of cost. It doesn't have any cost. Fedora, Mint, Red Hat, Debian, all they have different cost, but CentOS is something which is free of cost. Don't think that Linux has only 5 flavors. There are many other flavors in the market. But if you are aware of these terms, that's enough. One of the student, he asked me yesterday that recruiter is asking on which Linux you have worked on. So you can take few names if you want to. You can take CentOS, you can say Red Hat. Amazon has its own Linux. So when you create EC2, you select Amazon Linux 2 because Amazon has its own version of Linux. So just like that, there are multiple Linux which are available in the market. Don't get surprised. What is Red Hat? Red Hat is just a flavor of Linux. Okay. And Linux is actually made up of Unix. Unix, I think maybe 40 years or 30 or 40 years back, Unix came as an operating system in the market and Linux was made up of Unix. So Unix was the basic operating system. It was enhanced and it was made Linux. What Apple did, Apple as an organization, what it did, it again, instead of taking Linux, it took Unix and created the Mac. So whatever Mac you use, right? Whatever Mac you use, MacBook, if someone has MacBook, so MacBook is also made up of Unix, and Linux is also made up of Unix. That's why a lot of MacBook, they have terminal. So Linux also has terminal and MacBook also has terminal. The reason is that Linux and Mac are made up of Unix. Okay, so you can say Mac and Linux are brother and sister, and they have a single mom, that is Unix. Okay, so you can just remember it like that. I know it's funny. So, but yeah, so it's like Linux and Mac are brother and sister, and Unix is actually their mother, and you can remember it like that. So Mac is also made up of Unix, and Linux is also made up of Unix. Always remember this point.
Thank you for watching. Switch from non-IT to IT today. Explore www.thinkcloudly.com.